Hello everyone, welcome to Clear Perspective. I'm Serene. On January 31st, Project Veritas released a video showing an internal meeting with Facebook executives. In the video, Mark Zuckerberg believed that Facebook censorship would ensure a peaceful transition of power. Facebook's head of global affairs, Nick Clegg, admitted that the company has too much power. In the meeting, Zuckerberg said,
where Facebook is going to be able to work together with this new administration.
They also mentioned going to greater lengths with speech censorship. Zuckerberg seemed quite arrogant in the video. It suggested that Facebook played a pivotal role in securing Biden's presidency. On Thursday, Facebook made another outrageous move. It blocked all Australian users from sharing or viewing news on the platform. The company announced, quote, Facebook will restrict publishers and people in Australia from sharing or viewing Australian and international news content. This announcement is perceived as extremely offensive. It outlined the implications for Facebook users. Unfortunately, this means people and the news organizations in Australia are now restricted from posting news links and sharing or viewing Australian and international news content on Facebook. Globally, posting and sharing news links from Australian publishers is also restricted. Why is Facebook making such a big ban? According to Facebook's news release, it was in response to Australia's proposed new media bargaining law. Under the new legislation, the Australian government requires online platforms, especially Google and Facebook, to pay a fee to local news outlets for the revenue generated from news content. Breaches of the code would be punishable by a fine of $10 million. The bill is called the News, Media and the Digital Platforms Mandatory Bargaining Code. It was passed by the Australian House of Representatives on February 17th. It will become effective if the Senate passes the bill next week. Google and Facebook have been demonstrating their resistance to the bill. After several negotiations, Google decided to cooperate. They agreed to pay fees for the content and partner with Australian news outlets. However, Zuckerberg chose to declare war. He's quite assertive in trying to make the Australian government compromise. Facebook's decision to ban Australian news content resulted in serious consequences. Several Australian government web pages containing updates on the pandemic, weather, and natural disasters were blocked. Later, Facebook claimed that this was a mistake. Human Rights Watch, in an emailed statement, said, quote, this is an alarming and dangerous turn of events. Cutting off access to vital information to an entire country in the dead of the night is unconscionable. Australian Prime Minister Morrison was quick to respond. He said on his Facebook account, quote, these actions will only confirm the concerns that an increasing number of countries are expressing about the behavior of big tech companies, who think they are bigger than governments and that the rules should not apply to them. They may be changing the world, but that doesn't mean they run it. The Australian Health Minister's words were more direct.
Facebook has taken steps which are unprecedented and reprehensible, unacceptable in a democracy such as this, and an abuse of their power.
Facebook's shocking move also resulted in strong criticism from the international community. Given the overwhelming pressure, Facebook lifted the block on Australian government web pages, but news organizations remained blocked. This attack caused serious consequences for Australia. The Minister for the Environment confirmed that the Bureau of Meteorology was unable to issue warnings about floods in Queensland because the agency's Facebook page was not functioning for several hours. One of the Western Australian fire departments was unable to issue warnings for bushfires for the same reason. This drastic move from Facebook stopped people from receiving critical information in a timely manner and put their lives at risk. We've discussed in the past that we are not far from digital totalitarianism. Facebook's attack on Australia is a vivid demonstration of this. On the surface, this seems to be a commercial dispute over profits. At least, that's the excuse Facebook is using. In reality, this is a major escalation of digital totalitarianism in Western society. We all know that tech giants have censored speech in the past under the guise of fact-checking or blocking hate speech. But this time, it's not about censorship. It's an indiscriminate blocking of information from an entire nation. This is much more serious than the speech censorship in the past. In other words, this is an information war against a country. During a war, cutting off the enemy's communication channels is essential. Therefore, this attack against Australia is far beyond the realm of commercial disputes. Secondly, Facebook's actions are similar to cyber kidnapping. As we just mentioned, Facebook suddenly cut off the flow of information without any warnings. This included information on life-threatening issues such as updates on the pandemic, flash floods, and the bushfires. Essentially, it made hostages out of the Australians facing these disasters. The life-saving information will only be given if monetary demands are met. Everyone in society has become a part of a huge network of information. Freedom of speech is everyone's basic right. Anyone should be able to share and have access to information. Who can be deprived of these basic rights in a normal society? Perhaps only prisoners. In other words, depriving these basic rights is a power that only government agencies should have. Facebook's action signifies that they can target anyone if their desire for money is not satisfied. This includes presidents or an entire country. Although Facebook is a publicly owned company, it already has power that only governments should have. And this power is not limited to within America. In other words, Facebook is playing the role of a cyberspace administrator of the world. Not only can they dictate your news content, but also ban you from accessing any information. This is something that even the Cyberspace Administration of China has not achieved yet. Facebook has a much shorter history with totalitarianism than the Chinese Communist Party. But we can see that it has already aligned itself with the CCP. However, Facebook is born in the United States, the beacon of democracy and freedom for the world. It grew into a tech giant under this system. That's why we say that every system has its flaws, and there is no perfect system. The foundation of America's democracy is the traditional values or moral guidance nurtured by Christianity. In God we trust. Once this value has been undermined and destroyed by the socialist left, morality falls and the system inevitably becomes a tool that elites use to achieve tyranny. Alright, let's move on to the current situation of the CCP virus. We have not seen any good news from the UK since the emergence of the variant last December. A few days ago, Roland Winsendanger, a German physicist, published a 100-page study on the origins of the CCP virus. The study was based on an interdisciplinary research approach using a wide range of information sources. The conclusion he arrived at was that the virus was first leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. He told the German newspaper ZDF, quote, "I am 99.9% certain that the coronavirus came from the laboratory. Currently, the variants are causing the situation to worsen around the world." On February 18th, researchers in southern Finland discovered a new variant of the CCP virus named Fin796H. The team found that this new variant has features of both variant strains discovered in the UK and South Africa. The team also dubbed Fin796H as a unique strain and that it does not genetically resemble any other known variant. And the team found that this new strain cannot be identified by the current PCR tests. This means that if you were infected with this strain and underwent a test for the virus, the test will come back as negative. There also is the question of whether or not current vaccines will be effective against it. In the US, the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico discovered another heavily mutated variant. This hybrid virus is a combination of the UK B117 variant and the B1429 variant that originated from California. The UK B117 variant is highly transmissible, while the California B1429 variant is more resistant to vaccines. As we all know by now, the most crucial part of controlling a pandemic is to identify the source of infection. But because of the CCP's lies, this information has been hidden. The team sent to Wuhan by the World Health Organization were forced to conclude that the virus originated from cold chain transmission through the transport of frozen goods. The possibility that the virus spread through frozen food wasn't actually suggested by experts. It was announced by the CCP's media when Wuhan was slowly curbing its rate of infection. At the time, the successful containment was attributed to President Xi and other officials. With that, frozen foods transported from overseas were the blame for newly discovered cases. Salmon, scallops, Ecuador shrimps, Brazilian chicken wings, and various imported fruits were among the countless frozen foods that the CCP claimed to carry the coronavirus. To be honest, it's not surprising that this was the most popular theory voiced by the CCP officials. It shifted the accountability for the spread of the virus from local health measures to foreign elements. The narrative slowly became a fact as more people echoed the propaganda. Even WHO expert Peter Ben-Imbarek remarked that it could be a possibility. Imbarek was the scientist who led the WHO team that traveled to China to investigate the origin of the virus. At a news conference in Geneva, he said frozen meat and the seafood could have caused an early outbreak of the coronavirus. Although WHO's official website still says that there's no evidence the virus can be transmitted from food to humans. But the CCP media blamed any new cases of the virus on frozen food from overseas, as if it were a fact. Why would they do such a thing? It is actually quite simple. The CCP is trying to kill two birds with one stone. Blaming the spread on imported frozen foods would shift the accountability of new cases to overseas factors. It would also change the origin of the virus from Wuhan to overseas. In other words, the CCP is trying to manipulate health experts into making this piece of propaganda a scientific theory. Then, after this piece of propaganda gets turned into a fact, no one will ever be able to source the virus without opposition, keeping the origins of the CCP virus a mystery. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.